Years ago, shortly after I began studying to be a priest, I remember one of my formators telling me about a story he had just recently encountered. There was a doctor using a thermograph, and he was a thermograph machine, and he was measuring the amount of body heat that is coming off of people as they go to the hospital, as they get sick, as they die. The body heat kind of slowly begins to decrease over time. Well, at one point, he was in one side of the room and he was measuring a patient. When all of a sudden he saw someone come inside and their body showed up on the thermograph machine. But he said on the front of them there was this big pulsating heat coming forth. He didn't know what it was. And then all of a sudden he saw someone reach over and open up something. And he said the light got so bright that it covered up the entire screen of the thermograph. And so confused, the doctor went outside of the room and he came into the other room. And what do you think he found? A priest giving Holy Communion to the person in the sickbed. All they saw was bread, but that bread was apparelled in a celestial light. Later on, that doctor converted to the Catholic faith. This episode reminded me of one of my favorite poems by William Wordsworth, his famous ode, Intimations of Immortality. In it, he laments the fact that he says how, when I was young, I could see the whole world with the celestial light around it. It was luminous and majestic. It's like the glory of God covered everything. But as I have grown older, everything has begun to fade, and the world has grown dim and dark. It says, there was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth, and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. But it is not now as it was before. Turn wheresoever I may by night or day, the things which I have seen, I now can see no more. Whither is fled the visionary gleam? Where is it now, the glory and the dream? Where did it go? That light that used to fill my vision, the hope that used to fill my heart when I'd look around the world, the beauty that surrounded me. There was a time when all things were wrapped in the splendor of God, and now it is gone. He says, trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy. But he beholds the light and whence it flows. He sees it in his joy. But at length the man perceives it die away and fade into the light of common day. It's that last line that always haunts me. When the visionary gleam in our eyes begins to dim, and little by little we perceive it die away, all the things in this world that we once loved and found so beautiful begin to fade into the light of common day. And what this poem is, it's a warning against us. It's a warning to not allow time and suffering and the monotony of life to destroy the vision of the world that we had when we were young and fresh and everything was new and beautiful. Idea that heaven is all around us, but we become blind to it. It's interesting, in the apocryphal Gospel of Thomas, it's not included in the canon, but Christ has this great line. He says, the kingdom of heaven is all around men, but they will not see it. And in the Gospel of Luke, he says, the kingdom of heaven is within you. I think that's what he's referring to when he says, when everyone's asking him, when will the kingdom of heaven come? He says, unless you become like a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. In other words, unless you learn to look with the world with the freshness of youth, you can't see it for what it really is. You can't enter the kingdom that's right in front of you if you become blind to it. Children see the world so differently than us intellectual grown-ups. They perceive the visionary gleam, the glory and the dream, and they're free to rejoice in it. I think that's why the Blessed Virgin Mary, who does she always appear to when she comes to give us a message? Always goes to children. Why? I think it's because their vision hasn't been tainted yet. They're still open to receive the glorious revelations of God. They don't try to rationalize it, to figure it out. They receive it and they obey it. And then they put to shame all the great theologians who thought they had everything figured out before God came. If you think about it, the most real things in this world cannot be rationalized. Can you describe what color looks like to a blind person who's never seen it? Can you put into words the smell of a rose, the sound of a symphony? Can you rationalize what it felt like the first time you ever fell in love? Can you intellectually articulate what it was like to first hold your children in your arms? The first time you ever saw an ocean. It was all wrapped in glory, apparelled in a celestial light. But what happens? We grow up, we get smart, and we get accustomed. We see the ocean so many times that it just becomes another trivial sight. We hold our children in our arms long enough until it becomes just another chore. You're around your loved ones who so long ago their beauty captivated your entire being when you first fell in love. But little by little that vision begins to fade. And you perceive it turn into the light of common day. You no longer look at them with that same freshness. We go to church week after week after week, and the Mass becomes a mere routine, an obligation, something we check off in the morning before we go on with the rest of the week. It's no longer an encounter with the living God. And that's my fear, in all honesty, after 1 year of priesthood. It's that someday I'll look at the Eucharist and I won't see Jesus Christ with the same freshness of the youth of my faith. I won't really worship Him there. I won't adore Him there. And I'll cease to proclaim my faith in His presence on that altar. That little by little I would perceive my faith die away, and the Eucharist would fade into the light of common day, when the living bread becomes the dead bread, a mere symbol. And I always think about that moment when Christ looked upon Jerusalem, right, days before they crucified Him. And He said, "If only you knew the secret of peace, but it's been hidden from your eyes and you will be destroyed, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation." Everyone asking Him, "When will the kingdom of heaven come?" And He says, "Behold, the kingdom of heaven is at hand." And so many people missed it. Jesus Christ, who is the kingdom of heaven in the flesh, stood right before them and they couldn't see Him. They were blind. And so they couldn't enter the kingdom. And we are no different than them. We are no better than them. Those stories are a warning to us that we can become so accustomed to the presence of God right in front of us in our midst, that we can become blind to it. So I can never understand when Catholics leave the Catholic Church and they say it was because I wasn't being fed there. And there is some reason to that. If you can't understand the priest, or if he's not really preaching anything according to the Gospels, or you're not learning anything, I can understand the temptation to want to go somewhere else. But if they actually recognized what they were being fed with, they understood that no matter how weak of an instrument the priest was, that every single time they walked into that church, they received Jesus Christ in the flesh. They were being fed with God Himself. How could you recognize that and ever walk away, no matter how bad things get? On this feast of Corpus Christi, just ask yourself one question. When was the first time you recognized Christ in the presence in the Eucharist? When did you recognize that? When did you really come to believe? And it changed you. It changed the way that you look at Him. It changed the way that you receive Him when you come up to the altar. It changed what you do after you receive Him. Like going back to your pew and praying. Entering into your heart where He has just descended to be with Him. That when everyone else gets up and walks away, you stay here. And you pray, you stay with Him. What point in your life did that happen? Maybe even inspired you to start come visiting Him during the week. Because if it's true that God is present in the Eucharist, that means He's here every single day waiting for you in the tabernacle. Or inspired you to start coming to daily Mass once in a while. Or gave you the strength to stand up when other unbelievers or atheists mock your faith. When did that happen for you? That's when you enter into the kingdom of heaven. When you recognize the visitation of God Himself in your midst. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight to me did seem apparelled in celestial light. Well, my brothers and sisters, there is nothing in this world so apparelled in celestial light than the body of Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist. Let us pray that in this church we may never perceive that visionary gleam to die away and fade into the light of common day.